I'm gonna save you some money and show you a secret to getting the thickest and most brutal subdrop effects without any fancy plugins, samples, or VST instruments. Not only will you be saving money, but you'll also have uncompromised control over them. Things like drop time, pitch curves, starting and ending frequencies, and much more. Let's get into it. All you'll need is a DAW, preferably one that includes basic automation features, and stock plugins. I also recommend the use of some kind of mastering suite, like Ozone, JST Maximizer, Flatline, but if you don't own any of these, I'll cover stock plugins too. We will not be using any samples, so everything will be created within the DAW from scratch. Step 1, setting up your generator. At the heart of your subdrops is a sine wave generator, and most DAWs come with this in some way. I'll be using Cubase's test generator on a stereo track, but first we'll turn the fader level all the way down so that we aren't hit with the annoying sine wave sound. Next, we're going to open 2 automation lanes, one for control over the frequencies of the sine wave and the other for the volume. Lastly, we'll sum them in their own bus for additional processing. If you're adding a subdrop directly to your song within a project, then you can skip the next step. But if you're wanting to create a small library to mess around with, then I suggest you create a tempo lane in order to have variations on the drop speeds at specific tempos, like 120 BPM, 150 BPM, and so on. I recommend giving yourself some room to work with in each tempo block. So about 12 or more bars should be a good amount of room. Step 2, automation. We're going to automate a subdrop now. If you're adding a subdrop directly to a project, then you should look up the frequency of your tonic, or the starting note of your song's key. AI or Google is a great place to find that frequency number. A good frequency to start on would be 80 Hertz. If you don't care and just want to make subdrops explode your monitors. Then we'll set our ending frequency to 20 Hertz, or my favorite, 15. Most subwoofers and monitors push down to about 20 Hertz, but using 15 Hertz allows us to get the most out of the lowest part of the subdrop. But more on that in a little bit. Now, let's automate silence before the subdrop on the volume lane and silence after our subdrop. Since I'm using 120 BPM here, I'm going to make my subdrop a measure long. Here's what this sounds like so far. Those annoying blips and clips, yeah, they come from the volume instantly coming on and turning off. So let's fix that. We're going to add a small ramp in volume right before the drop. And we'll automate the volume down at the end as well. This is why I like 15 Hertz being the end frequency, because we can now ease the drop out, but still get the lowest frequencies possible. Fuck yeah. Now take a listen to the drop. See how clean it is? Now you can just stop right here. But I think this subdrop is boring as hell, and it probably won't stand out that much. We're gonna spice it up a little bit. Step 3, treatment. One thing that can make your subdrop stand out and feel massive is with harmonics. We can achieve this in many ways. Let's start with plugins. Now, if you have a plugin like Waves Max Bass, that will work too. But with a mastering plugin like JST Maximizer or Ozone, I find there's more control over the harmonics. And you can better avoid artifacts and clipping. Which suite do you like more for something like this? Let me know in the comments below. But even so, what if you don't have anything like this? Well, most DAWs come with a stock distortion plugin and some form of limiter, clipper, or maximizer. Before I move on, it's crucial that we do not saturate the sub-low end of these drops. So we'll be processing these drops in a way that keeps the clear low end push almost untouched. Trust me, you'll thank me later for this. We'll start by duplicating our subdrop. Then we'll add an EQ plugin to both. The EQ must be after the test tone generator, and we'll name our tracks accordingly. One will be named sub low and the other sub high. This way we don't get confused as we process. On the sub low track's EQ, we'll add a low pass filter at 60 Hertz. We'll set the dB per octave to 12. Then on the sub high EQ, we'll set a high pass at 60 Hertz, and again, 12 dB per octave. Essentially what we've done is create a separated sub-low end. Make sure both subdrop tracks are routed to the dedicated subdrop bus we made earlier. Now we are free to add effects to the individual subdrop parts, and then they'll be summed within the bus as one whole subdrop. Hell yeah, brother! stupid. Okay, to add harmonics, we'll need to use some form of distortion. You'll need to play around with the distortions in your DAW. And for Cubase, I'll be adding the Magneto 2 tape saturator to the sub-high track. After playing with the amount of distortion, I think I'll set it about here. These harmonics will allow the subdrop to push through dense mixes and also create a feeling of brutality. Play around with other effects on the sub-high bus for your own custom flavor. You may need to correct the phase of the sub-low track by adding and then bypassing the same plugins used on the sub-high track. That's because some plugins create some latency during playback that can affect the phase relationship of other tracks. All right, we're done, right?
Nope.
There's a secret to this madness, and that's to add an attack to the drop itself. Booyah! Step 4, creating attack. For this, we'll need to create another test tone track. Name it Sub Thump and route it to the Subdrop bus 2. This track will be used for an artificial hit. You can use kick drum samples for this to save time, but I might as well show you the fun do-it-yourself way. First, we'll set the frequency to 80 or 100 Hz, depending on how we want the attack to hit. This can be adjusted later, so just pick one to get started. Next, on the volume automation track, set a starting point at the beginning of the measure, and then a very short cutoff like this. You can play around with how long the thump will be, but make sure the initial attack comes from the automation suddenly kicking the track into play. We'll also adjust the volume a tad to make sure the attack isn't too loud. And the final step here is to develop the low end. And that's done by going over to the sub-low and sub-high tracks and making their starting volume softer. Offsetting the start of the subdrop allows the thump to come through first and give the perception of hitting really hard. Just listen to the difference of not doing so. Now you can play with the frequency of the sub thump and set it where you feel the most slam for the overall drop. Step 5, master it. Lastly, we need to finalize our subdrop. On the bus we created to sum everything together, we'll add a limiter or your choice of mastering suite. From here, we can add more harmonics. We can even widen our subdrops and do anything we want to experiment with. Otherwise, let's set this limiter to keep our signal from going over 0 dB overall. So avoid clipping and then export. Using a maximizer is great for keeping your subdrops loud all the way till the end of the drop, but make sure not to overdo it and keep that low and clean. And that's it. Here's the final product. By now, you should be able to create your own super powerful and industry-ready subdrops to use in your productions. Make sure to like the video, of course. And if you have your own crazy tricks for explosive subdrops, put them in the comments for me to read. That's all I have for today. I'll see you in the next one. Subdrop! Sure.